Alright guys, so far we've looked at working with basic shapes in Illustrator to create all of the points, paths and handles that we require. Working with basic shapes is very efficient and quite fun to do, but it limits the kinds of shapes that you can create. You end up with just basic geometry and more complex geometric shapes by adding or subtracting parts of those things together using the Shape Builder tool. However, you're going to eventually need even more complex shapes, which are perhaps more organic or have more curves and things on there, which are a lot harder to create using just basic geometry. So you're going to need a method of creating all your points and all your paths and all your handles yourself. And that is where your pen tool comes in. In your toolbar, you'll find it pretty close towards the top. It looks like an old school pen nib. Keyboard shortcut is P for the pen tool. And to be honest, the more you use Illustrator, the more you're going to be using this pen tool. You'll probably find, I don't know, I'd say like between 70 and 80% of the work you do in Illustrator will be creating shapes with the pen tool. With the pen tool, you create every point, every path, and every handle yourself with the pen and your mouse. The pen tool has a bit of a learning curve to it. It takes some practice to really get used to it. Unlike things in Photoshop, which all kind of mimic real-world tools, like your brushes and your spray paints and all those sorts of things, the pen tool doesn't really have much of a real-world equivalent. So it's almost like a completely new interface, and it does take some getting used to. So don't feel discouraged if you find the pen tool a bit tricky to work with at first. Everyone's the same. It'll probably take a good day or two, or maybe even a week of practice with the pen tool before you feel completely comfortable with it. Anyway, let's just have a look at the operation here and see what it can be used for. So pen tool is fairly straightforward to begin with. You simply click to create a point. Then the pen tool will wait for your next point. So you click somewhere else to put another one in. It will join those 2 points with a path. Now at the moment we're not creating handles, so you can see there are no curves. So I can keep creating points with the pen tool, and it keeps joining those with paths, and it will continue to do so until I go back to my first point, and you'll notice a little O appears next to your pen tool there. When you get back to your first point, you can click on that, and that will close off that path. So you've basically created a shape. So when you click again, you'll be starting a new path or a new shape. So working with the pen tool, you can keep clicking to add points, like so, to create shapes. As soon as you click on the first point of that shape to close it off, you will then be able to start creating a new shape. Get rid of those. When you're working with the pen tool, if you hold down Shift as you draw your points, much like with rotating, you can see it limits where you can put your next point. So it limits these to 45-degree angles again. So if you want to create perfectly horizontal or vertical lines, you can do that by holding down Shift as you draw with the pen tool. One thing to be mindful of here is the pen tool doesn't like being interrupted. So if you're in the middle of drawing a shape like this, and then you say switch to like the magnifying glass tool, so you can zoom in a little bit. When you go back to the pen tool and click to put in your next point, you see it starts a new shape. It doesn't continue on with the old one. So yeah, the pen tool does not like being interrupted. If you change tools while you're working with the pen tool, you will stop working on the shape you're currently working with. If that does happen, so you switch tools for whatever reason, then you go back to the pen tool, what you can do is just click on the last point that you drew, and then it should attach itself to that path again so you can carry on. But ideally, you don't want to change tools while you're trying to draw your shape if you can help it. So if you do need to zoom to help you draw that shape, I would suggest holding down Option and scrolling your mouse wheel. Because you're not changing tools, it doesn't interrupt your shape drawing. If you need to move your view around, I suggest holding down Space, which temporarily turns your tool into the hand tool. And when you let go of space, you're still drawing on the same shape. So yeah, if you can help it, Option scroll for zooming, hold down space and click and drag for moving your view will allow you to keep working on your shape without it breaking. You can see so far all we're doing is paths and points, no handles, so therefore we have no curves. You can also draw your path, you can also draw your handles with the pen tool. So as you're clicking to put points along like so, if you want a point to have some handles, so you start drawing some curves, you need to click to put your point in, but keep your mouse button held down, and then drag outwards from that point. So again, you got to click, hold, and then drag, and you're attaching handles to that point. When you put handles on a point, you can see it's going to curve the path that goes into that point. And that's controlled by this handle here. This second handle, as you can see, actually controls the line going out of the point as well. This is generally desirable. You want those two handles there because it gives you a nice smooth curve running through that point. So you can be guaranteed you're not going to get like a little kink or a little bump in there because of the way you draw with this pen tool. It does start to dictate where your points need to be placed when you're drawing a shape. We'll come to that later. But yeah, that's the basic interface there. So click and drag to put your handles on a point, and then you can start to create more fluid, more organic shapes, like so. So this will be useful with parts of your letterforms or maybe entire letterforms when you start tracing over your photos. The adding of handles to points is the thing that takes getting used to when you're working with the pen tool, because you have to familiarize yourself with or get used to working out where you should put those points to get the best results from your handles. It sounds a little bit confusing, but the more you work with this, the more you start to just get a feel for where a point should go in order to get the curve looking the way you want it to. There are a few things you can do with the pen tool to help you manage that. So when you're drawing your handles, when you put in a point, if you draw them in and then realize that you're not a big fan of the curve that gets drawn there and you need to modify it, you can modify your last handle without interrupting the shape. If you hold down Control or Command on the keyboard, you can grab your last handle and you can tweak it slightly. And then when you let go of Command or Control, you're still working on that shape. So you'll probably find you rely on this quite a bit when you start. I still rely on this when I'm drawing my shapes. After you've drawn a point in, if you hold down Command or Control, depending on whether you're Mac or PC, you can tweak your last handle. And as soon as you let go of Control, you can you can continue working on your shape. Another thing you might need to do is go from a curve to a straight line. Now by default it doesn't look like you can do that. You can see because we have those two handles going through the point, the path that goes into the point and the path that's going to come out of the point, as Illustrator previews for you, must be curved. So if I want to go from here straight to here, and I don't want it to curve around like that, what you can do is click on the point that you've just made straight after you draw it, and what that will do is delete the second handle. So it means you'll get a straight line going to your next point, or if you put handles on your next point, then you can curve into that one to create like a little corner point there. So yeah, whenever you want a corner, you either need no handles on that point, or if it's coming out of a curve, you need to remove the second handle just by clicking on the point you drew, and then you can go straight to another one like so. So for example, do a curve there, curve around to this one. Now I want to go straight across like this, so I'm just going to click once on that point that I just drew to remove the second handle, go across to there, and then we'll carry on. Now, another thing you can do is you can make your next line curve. So if you've made a point that has no handles, but you want your next line to curve, you can add a handle to that point. So I want to do a line that kind of curves around here. So with this point, I'm just going to click on it and drag, and I can draw a handle for the next line only without affecting the previous one. This is another one of those things that takes some getting used to. You need to work out how long and in which direction you need that handle to get the results that you desire. But that's something that comes with practice. The best thing I can suggest to you is the longer the handle is, the more curvature you will get. And you want to point it roughly in the direction that you want the next line to start taking. And here. So around here, it looks like I'm going to want a corner point. So I click once to get rid of that second handle. Go to there, there, and there. So to recap, click to put in points. The pen tool draws straight paths between them. If you need curves, you need to make handles. So you click to draw your point, but keep the mouse button held down, and you drag out your handles like so. If you put in a point, but then you want to create a corner, so you go straight to the next one, and you have those handles there, you can click on the point you just drew, and that will remove the second handle, so you can go straight to your next one. If you have a corner, but you want your next line to curve, you can just click and drag on that point to draw out a handle, which will give your next line some instructions to curve. It will take some getting used to work out how long that handle is and in which direction it needs to go. And if you want to tweak any part of your previous path, just hold down Control or Command, depending on whether you're PC or Mac, and you can tweak the handles of that last path you just drew to refine it as you're going. Now, of course, once you're done, you can always grab your white arrow, and you can use that to modify all the points and all the paths on your object as well. So if you don't get it perfect the first time around, it's not a big deal. Once you close off that shape with the pen tool, you can then just select your direct selection tool, keyboard shortcut A, and then you can manipulate those points, paths, and handles as you see fit. It's probably worth mentioning at this time as well, with the newer version of Illustrator, you've probably noticed these dots pop up in all these corners here. Those are basically an easy way of rounding off a corner. If you have a full shape selected and you grab one of those dots, you can see it will round all of the corners in that shape. If you just want to round one corner off, just click on the anchor point in that corner. You'll only get one little dot there, and then you'll be able to pull that in to round off the corner as you see fit. Very useful feature in some of the newer versions of Illustrator, the ability to round off corners without having to draw those paths yourself. So that's another thing you can think about there as well. They become active when you're working with the direct selection tool, or what I would call the white arrow. But that will help you in certain situations as well. Now, like I say, this pen tool requires some practice. So I have some suggestions for you there. In Blackboard, and also the link to this video, I'll provide you with a link, on Blackboard and in the comments for this video on YouTube, I will provide a link to what's called the Feeler pen tool exercises. So this is just a graphic designer who's made a blog. You can download these Illustrator files, and it gives you basically a little template here that you can draw over the top of. And it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to create these shapes you see here. And this will help familiarize yourself with the basic functions of the pen tool. So if you're feeling a bit shaky, I suggest you take the time out to run through these pen tool exercises just to start getting used to it. Also, I'll provide a link to this as well. Online, there's a little game called the Bezier game, which helps you master the pen tool. And if you just get started on that, you can basically play this game here to get used to where you should be putting your points and how you should be creating your shapes. In the next video, we'll do a sample letter form so you can see how you could use the pen tool to create these complex letters.